one of those times where you get really nervous and then you walk on stage and then you trip and validate that nervousness. So thanks everyone. It's great to have you all here. I have a great honor to be able to introduce Paul Eremenko. He is the director of Project Ara. So he is working on a modular smartphone. It's incredibly exciting and it has a lot of potential to change the way we use our phones for the next few years. So let's bring up Paul. Yeah, watch that step. It's a doozy. All right, Paul, thanks for coming. Let's go ahead and have a seat. Now, it's pretty exciting because Paul has brought a prototype of the Project Ara smartphone.
Indeed.
So can you give us a high-level idea of what's going on here? This is the first working prototype.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is our first functional prototype. We call it the Spiral 1 device of the Ara modular platform. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with Ara, it's really our attempt to create the hardware equivalent of the Android app ecosystem. So to really lower the barrier to entry for developers to create new functionality and introduce new technologies into the mobile space. Google here, as with Android, acts as the curator of a two-sided market between developers and consumers. So we release a developers kit called the MDK, and an early release of that is on our website today. If you go to projectara.com/MDK and have a look, and that's around this platform. This Spiral 1 prototype represents the MDK that's up there. Right. We're working towards next generation release in the November-December timeframe, as well as a second generation of prototypes to illustrate that functionality for our developers conference in January. And so, if you'd like, I can sort of show what the prototype does today. So we have a set of modules on the back. We have what we call 1x2 modules and 2x2 modules. In this particular prototype, there are no 1x1 modules, which would be sort of half the size of this 2x2. But those will exist in subsequent versions for really small, like flash storage or something like that.
Now you got this frame, as you call it the endoskeleton.
That's right. Everything is tied together by the endo frame, and the endo frame is really the only component that Google would make.
Right.
And the modules themselves would come from our developer ecosystem, and we don't want to compete in that ecosystem with our own developers. Right.
Now, are there any components within the endoskeleton itself, or is it all just strictly the modules that developers are going to be putting together?
Yeah, so the endo acts as the thing that brings everything together from a data transfer perspective. So it has a network switch, an on-device network switch. That's a significant difference between the Ara platform and sort of traditional phones, is the notion of an on-device packet switch network. Right. There's also a power bus, a very flexible power bus that allows any module to supply power, to consume power, or to store power, and also switch between those modes in the course of operation. So you can have multiple batteries, you can hot swap your battery, modules can be a battery and something else, or a charger and something else. So the number of permutations is sort of infinite. And then the third thing that it does, of course, is it mechanically ties everything together. So it has a technology called an electropermanent magnet, which is a hybrid between a permanent magnet and an electromagnet. So it has an on state and an off state, but it's passive in both states. And in fact, the app that I have up here on the phone right now is our EPM actuation app. And so this is similar. This is obviously less nice, I think, than what we would actually put in consumer hands. Right. But is an early prototype, right? And the idea would be that you would be able to unlock a particular module.
Okay, so that deactivates it, so you can safely eject it.
Deactivates the magnet.
So it's kind of like when you stick your SD card into your laptop, and you're supposed to eject it safely.
That's right.
So what would happen if you were to just yank it out?
And so now I can remove the module. This particular module is is there for illustrative purposes. It's an LED module, so it does really nothing. It lights up an LED. And the purpose for it was to demonstrate to developers what real estate they have to play with, right?
Okay.
In this particular platform, and so I can remove it. I can remove the Wi-Fi module here.
And the combination of modules can be pretty much endless. Like you can choose pretty much whatever you want. So you don't want a camera, that's fine. You can replace it with
sensors.
That's right.
And in fact, speaking of sensors, I have a little prototype of a pulse oximeter here.
Ooh, okay.
So it's a very basic medical device. It uses differential reflectivity of 2 LEDs at 2 different frequencies to measure blood oxygen content, and it sometimes works. So so let me give it a shot here. Let me insert
You're
it.
risking it because you know how it goes with demos, public demos.
Yeah, demos are always. And let me put this LED back in to a different slot.
Okay. Now, while you're doing this, you're running a stock version of Android. Is that right?
So this particular device runs a stock version of KitKat.
Okay.
And that's what was available when we were starting development on this, almost a year ago. And all of the device drivers for all the various modules are precompiled into the kernel.
Okay.
As we move forward, that's obviously not a scalable model, right? If you have a developer ecosystem with thousands of modules, potentially tens of thousands of modules, who knows? You can't link every one of those device drivers into the kernel. It's a bloat problem. It's also a security issue.
Sure.
So what we're doing is we're actually for Lollipop. What we're developing is it's actually this happens at the Linux kernel, not at the Android platform level.
Right.
Is a set of generic class drivers. So similar to the way USB has generic device classes, so there's a USB camera class or USB sensor class, and as long as a device conforms to that class, the driver is there already in the kernel. And any unique functionality, so say you have a camera that has night vision or some other unique function, that would be run in user space. So that would be run at the application level.
Okay.
Not at the kernel, at the Linux kernel level.
Okay, so the developers, when they're putting these modules together, they don't really have to worry about, okay, is this compatible with Android and Lollipop and next future versions, or how does that work?
That's right. So right now we're working, we're prototyping these features on the Lollipop release, and we would expect, assuming everything goes well, and everything works, we would work with our friends in the Android team to mainline those modifications into a subsequent release, like an M release or an N release, and we will also upstream it into kernel.org, which is the Linux kernel repository. Okay,
and I know that we're quite a ways away from this, but when the time comes and a new version of Android comes out, let's say the M version, and this is out by that point, how quickly is the turnaround to getting this updated to that M update?
So
how long would it take between?
I think our vision ultimately, right, is that there would not be sort of a separate Ara Android. Is that we would mainline the feature set that's necessary.
Okay.
I think that feature set is actually kind of a superset of other things that I think in the long run Android would want to do anyway. To support cars and TVs and other, as the ecosystem starts to grow.
Okay.
Right. We view this as a stress case, basically. This is harder probably than all of those, so it's kind of a nice stress case. So the PulseOx app you see is running here. If you want to put your finger on top of that LED,
just right here,
you'll see differential reflectivity at 940 and 660 nanometers, which are the two LEDs. It's not calibrated. This wasn't really meant to be a sort of a home use medical device yet. It's just a prototype.
Yeah, but that's pretty wild.
Yeah, and it also demonstrates sort of the industrial design language, which was a real sort of a really nuanced activity for us, right? Because what we want is we want developers to be able to do crazy stuff that like sticks out of the phone, right, and supports a variety of different applications. Yet we want it to be a unified whole to the user and to make it beautiful and cool and nice to hold.
Right.
And so trying to navigate that tension in the industrial design was one of the sort of interesting challenges.
Yeah, I would say, and we were talking a little bit backstage about some of the challenges that you're having with the 3D printing. So can you touch upon that a little bit and and what the plan is for the first major release?
I was going to play a clip from Beauty and the Beast first.
Aw.
Okay.
Did we get that on the camera?
There you go.
Yeah, the more video evidence that we have that this is working, the better.
It's a real thing. It's a real thing. Yeah.
It's not just vaporware here. This is actually coming along.
So let me turn it off and answer your question.
Sure. I know Beauty and the Beast is very distracting.
So. Sorry, what were we talking about? You also forgot. See, I don't feel so bad.
That's okay. I'm sure it was a very enlightening question.
Oh, 3D printing. I'm sorry. Yeah. Yes. So we did try to look at having consumers. So the shells, right? Why 3D printing? So the shells on the modules are removable and are meant to be user replaceable. And I opened the wrong module because this one doesn't have a shield. this LED module is properly equipped with a shield. And so the shell is removable relatively easily, and we're trying to improve the snap feature design, so it's kind of a more wow moment when you remove and attach the shell. Underneath is a shield that prevents the consumer, the user, from touching the bare integrated circuits. But this piece is replaceable, and here we use clear polycarbonate just for illustrative purposes. But we want consumers to be able to aesthetically customize the device in addition to functionally customizing it. And so we looked at 3D printing and using 3D printing to create the module shells. That has an interesting advantage of being able to actually print the antenna using a conductive ink layer as part of the 3D printing. And what we found is that it's really exciting tech, and what we focused on was getting it to production volume and consumer grade finishes. And it looked like the volume was going to happen, but the finishes and the color maybe will take a little bit more time. And so for now, for our sort of immediate prototyping needs and probably for the market pilot that we want to do later in 2015, we use dye sublimation, which is it's a coating on top of a polycarbonate, of an injection molded polycarbonate that you can infuse at high temperature with ink, and you can get a very high resolution color imagery. It's a technology similar to what's used in custom phone cases that you can buy at mall kiosks.
Right. Okay. So that way you can still have some customization.
That's right.
So
you don't get the 2.5-dimensional
personal
structures or the textures that you can get out of 3D printing.
Sure.
But you get full resolution, full color resolution at 600 DPI plus.
And I do want to show this off really quick because this is two different. Oh, apparently this is going to shut down. But there's two different sizes here. There is a third one that's going to be coming a few months down the road. The phablet size.
That's right.
So
that's right. And the modules are interchangeable, so it's worth pointing out. That,
so like you can change out the display if you want.
But interchangeable between sizes also, right?
Oh yes. Sorry.
So the 1x2,
Yes.
if you show the back of that device,
right?
These are the 1x2 modules, right? So these go in here as well, right?
Yeah,
so you
absolutely.
could have multiple frames, and in the phablet they just go sideways. So the phablet is about 1/3 wider than this one.
Okay.
And so you could have a couple of endo frames, and depending on what your use case is, right? You know, if you're going out or something, right? You take the small one, you put it in your pocket. If you're consuming content or doing work on the device, you might use a bigger frame for that purpose. But your storage could go along with you. Your CPU could conceivably go with you, and a variety, your camera, right, et cetera.
Right. Oh, that's great that you can swap this all out. Okay, so let's talk really quickly about the price and the time that you expect this to come out. This is certainly going to be more developer-facing than customer-facing at first, right?
Yeah, so thus far, we've really focused mainly on developers and trying to build the developer ecosystem, right? In any two-sided market, you have to have critical mass on both sides before it becomes a viable ecosystem. So most of our sort of communications and outreach has been to the developer community. Through these developer conferences and through a variety of different forums, including this one. So we do intend to do a consumer pilot. The plan is to do that later in 2015, and we will announce the details for the pilot. We're busy at work sort of finalizing those details. We'll announce them at our developers conference in January.
Right. And how does the store work? You just announced recently that you have this store in the works for developers to submit their modules and be able to sell them.
Yeah, so it's conceptually analogous to the Play Store for apps.
Yeah. But they won't be connected. They won't be the same thing, right? You won't have a.
That's right. So
like you won't go into the Play Store and.
So we are a development project, right? So we try not to get ourselves on critical path to major Google products like Play, right? So yeah, so it is a separate thing that we're developing, but conceptually it's analogous in that consumers will be able to browse modules. There will be some curation to help you figure out like what most of us don't have a basis for deciding what application processor we want in a phone, right? That's not really a consumer-facing kind of spec usually, and so we'll provide some curation. We call them phone makers that help you make those decisions based on sort of whatever level of engagement you as a user, you as a shopper want. right? So some people will want to tweak every parameter on their device. Others
Right.
will say, hey, here's my general use profile. Why don't you configure the phone for me?
Okay,
Right?
so you have like a little kit, and then you can also go a la carte.
That's right.
Basically.
That's exactly
Okay.
right. It's a lot like ordering from a menu.
Do you have any specific certifications or guidelines that you want the developers to follow, or is it just that you just want to make sure that they follow the MDK?
Yeah, so the MDK is the governing document for the platform. So,
Okay.
so the MDK has currently has a lot of the technical specifications, and in the next release, it'll also have some of the safety-related things and other more sort of consumer-facing and quality-related aspects as well.
Okay.
And so yes, conformance to the MDK is mandatory, but actually selling through our module marketplace is not mandatory.
Okay.
So developers can sell, will be able to sell do as they wish with their modules.
Okay.
So similarly to the way that you can download, you can in theory install an Android app out of channel. Right, there's a setting that you can find in the settings, buried in the setting in your phone settings,
Sure.
that let you install apps from outside of Play. Similarly, we're trying to be fairly laissez-faire with the developer ecosystem, and so developers are free to sell modules through other channels, but then they don't get the stamp of approval, basically, and certification.
I see. Okay. And when developers do this and they sell their modules, are you going to have certain guidelines on pricing for them? Do you have expectations on how much people are going to charge for these modules?
So don't know yet, and I think that's true across the board on pricing. There's sort of this notion that seems to have proliferated that it's a $50 phone. It's a fallacious notion. What I actually said at the first developers conference was that we are trying to maintain cost discipline, and this was messaging to the developer community. We need to maintain cost discipline. We want this to be a device for the next 5 billion people, as well as for the existing premium feature phone user, premium smartphone users.
Yep.
And so we should maintain, on the endo side, on the frame side, as well as developers should span the full gamut of features and costs, including sort of a low end or entry level configuration.
Yeah.
And so $50 was a bill of materials cost target, right?
I see.
That the bill, try not to put sort of unobtainium, very expensive unobtainium in.
I could
into
see
your
a
phone.
huge use case, like you said, the next 5 billion smartphone users. Of course, is going to have a huge focus on emerging markets, and this is one of the biggest use cases to me. Is people can start off with a basic kit, and then just be able to upgrade as they can afford to do so.
That's right. That's exactly right. And so you can imagine sort of migrating up the value chain towards a premium device in very fine-grained steps at your own pace. So rather than buying an entry-level device, throwing it away 2 years later, buying a new device that's slightly better, throwing it away again, right, and then buying an aspirational premium device, you just upgrade the modules, right? And in fact you can share modules, right? You can have a really nice camera for the family, as opposed to everybody having to invest in one. You can swap modules, right? We also imagine that a secondary market might emerge around this, where you can sell the modules back into the marketplace as a used module, right?
So you could have like a GameStop for modules.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Tell me, when we're talking about use cases, I'm sure you've had all sorts of ideas from developers, like developers coming in saying, this is our idea for a module. What do you think? So what is the most, what is the use case that has the greatest potential for changing the world as you know it? I know that's a very broad question, but like I can picture this having some grand ability to change the way people live in say Africa, for example. I think that's one of the hugest places it could have an impact.
So I'm loath to try and predict what will and won't change the world. That seems like a losing proposition.
Sure.
But I can tell you what I'm most passionate about, right? And one of the things that I'm most passionate with this platform is the idea of being able to deliver a broad array of personal diagnostic devices, personal medical diagnostic devices, personal environmental monitoring devices, and then also potentially to be able to crowdsource data patterns from a multitude of users, right? From these kinds of things. And I do believe that has the potential, especially in the developing world, to change the face of healthcare diagnostics. Right, and the way we of detection and diagnostics and the way care is delivered. Yeah. And so that personally excites me, and we have had a lot of developer interest in that ecosystem, sort of in that niche of the ecosystem. But honestly, I don't know, right? And I think that if you were to ask in 2006, 2007, what are the apps that are going to be in the App Store that are going to change the world? I don't think you could have predicted predicted many of the things
Flappy
that have
Bird.
changed. That have well, or Uber, right, and other kinds of things that just changed industries, right?
Yeah, like there's some fantastic ideas, and I think the beautiful part of Ara is the fact that you are enabling people to come up with those ideas, and I think part of the excitement is, of course, seeing what people do come up with. So really quick, because I know we're running out of time here, I'm curious about the 2-year deadline. So when is that deadline hitting? When is Project Ara officially done?
Yeah. So where the 2 years comes from, just to give everybody a little bit of context, is that ATAP, the organization that I sit in within Google, Advanced Technologies and Projects, is modeled on the innovation model of DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. And my boss, the vice president of ATAP, Regina Dugan, is the former director of DARPA. I also was formerly at DARPA. And our belief is that innovation under time pressure is higher quality innovation. Is that applying time pressure to people and to projects lets us take risk, decreases risk aversion, increases risk tolerance, and ensures that we get to market to an actual use case quickly rather than theorizing and trying to beat down the risk. So to answer your question sort of directly, we're about a year into the project.
Okay.
So we have about another year to go.
Okay.
And then a market pilot.
Ah, okay. So then the market pilot happens, and your duties are all done at that point? Or
well, I don't. That's a philosophical question.
Sure.
when are my duties?
Yeah,
when is my
like it's
obligation?
not like exactly 2 years, like midnight. Oh, you're done. See you later. You're out the door.
Well, so there is an obvious balance between sticking to the timeline, right, and also being overly inflexible, right?
Yeah.
So whether the 2 years can include the first month of the market pilot or the second month, how sort of exactly where it goes, I think we'll see. But the prototype schedule and the platform development schedule that we have, which is Spiral 2, Spiral 3, which will begin in December and which will run through early spring, and the developer conference cadence, right? So the one in January on the 14th and 21st in Mountain View, Singapore, and a variety of other remote sites, satellite sites.
Right. It's great to see that you're going around the world for this.
That's right. That's right. We did find that a lot of our developers are not in Silicon Valley. Lots of interest in in India, in Japan, in Europe, across the world. And so keeping to that cadence and keeping the time discipline and the sort of the temporal discipline and making sure that we hit all of those timelines is central to the innovation model.
Fantastic. Paul, it's wonderful to have you on.
It's my pleasure.
So,
thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely.